they say stick to the basics. Is there anything that's a little bit more advanced that you kind of recommend to your clients?
Um, it's interesting. We want to connect everything to the internet, and my question to everyone is why?
We're speaking with Shawn Murray. He's a president and chief academic officer at Murray Security Services and assigned to the United States Missile Defense Agency. Dr. Murray has worked with the NSA, FBI, CIA, and U.S. Defense and State Departments on various cyber initiatives and has over 20 years of IT communications and cybersecurity experience. This man has an amazing resume. I've checked it out on LinkedIn, and I will make sure to put that in the description below. He's also been a keynote speaker, so he really knows his stuff. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Tony, good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you too. Now, Shawn and I kind of met. It was kind of funny because I was actually looking to interview people for our podcast, and he decided to interview me. So, ours should be up sometime soon. But yeah, I'm glad that I'm finally getting to interview you now. We have been looking with Ukraine and Russia and the conflict that's going on right now. People have been warning about, spillover from malware and things like that coming out. Like, we've been seeing Hermetic Wiper coming start and, continued attacks, but we haven't really seen much spillover. Well, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, we've seen several different variants of Hermetic Wiper, and there's the state-sponsored hacking through the government itself, and then you've got the some relationships, right? So sponsored, what we refer to as sponsored hackers or hacktivists. And we know when we talk about hacking, there's different perspectives. Am I trying to sway public opinion, global opinion? It's more of a hacktivism type of social media, social influence, social engineering perspective to sway opinion one way or another. And then we've got the actual damage. If you think about Russia right now, based on all the global sanctions placed on the country, it's not able to trade in the euro, the dollar, or very many exchanges at all. So how do they generate revenue? And some of the perspectives are, we get state-sponsored hacking towards organizations for ransomware. So ransomware will provide a revenue stream in order to support some of the initiatives coming out of Russia to continue its campaign. What are the sanctions going to do to Russia? Well, it's hit social opinion within its own country. One of the things that we were talking about earlier, the young technical professionals, for example, within Russia, a lot of them are leaving the country in droves, and those are the citizens that Russia wants to keep in their country, right? To advance in those areas, and Putin in that regime has put forth incentives to keep young professionals within the country, tax incentives, housing incentives, and it's worked just kind of backwards. A lot of the social influence, social media in the beginning, from Russia itself to try and present falsities through social media were declassified and resent out by Western states like the United States and Europe. The ability to declassify that information and really explain what's going on hindered that aspect from Russia's perspective. But it's still very influential within Russia. The media itself is still presenting falsities within its own citizens, presenting on social media and within the state-run media itself. But a lot of the state media has shut down as well. A lot of prominent media relations, and broadcasters have shut down, and they're not broadcasting because of things that are going on. So you've got the tactical aspect of it, the damage from malware. You got the social media aspect of it, which is very, very powerful to sway opinions one way or another. So I think we'll continue to see some of that. I just don't know that it's as effective as it was, say 2 or 3 years ago, with the ability to, sway public opinion, turn around, declassify it, and paint the true picture to the rest of the world.
Okay, and when it comes to the government agencies coming out and telling us to shields up to increase our defenses and such. Do you think that that still applies, or do you think that it's remaining between Russian?
No, I absolutely think that it's going to be worldwide. Anybody who openly um, uh, states anything against Putin, his initiatives, the state initiatives, is going to reap repercussions. So, the more prominent you are, there's state actors and state-funded actors that are going to come after those groups, those entities, and it's going to continue on. You've got to be able to show that you're willing to go that extra mile. So if you're Putin, you want to make sure that you put your boot heel on the back of the necks of your adversaries, whether they're somebody that you're fighting hand to hand tactical combat, or within the media, or have global influence. We've seen prominent members of society within Russia disappear. We've seen prominent members of, the Ukraine. We've seen members of government kidnapped, in some instances killed or murdered. Lots of other atrocities that are going to have to be figured out later on. But yeah, make no mistake, everybody needs to be vigilant right now.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's getting pretty intense there. I I do have a question for you when it comes to communications and media. You kind of touched on that there. I think it's interesting because we hear two sides of things here, which is one is that it's wonderful that Elon Musk is helping to provide internet to the Ukraine. And meanwhile, we're also seeing people nervous that Elon Musk is acquiring portions of Twitter and buying it up. What's your take on that? Do you think that it could be a positive force, or is it something we need to look out for?
Yeah, so this is another one of those. Depending on what your thoughts are on freedom and speech, and that is, you have a billionaire with somebody with lots of influence that wants to purchase a social media company because he doesn't like the way the platform manages its activities, its streams, and that can be a problem if you're of a mindset, or you come from a country where freedom of speech is highly regarded. You don't want to see someone with the influence that Elon has be able to control the way that social media platforms allow communications. And one of the most immediate, direct, in your face, most used is Twitter. And if you think about how easy it is to actually tweet something, the immediacy that it's actually released and people are allowed to comment on it. What are the motivations as to why he wants to take it over? Are they business reasons, or are they control reasons? And I think I think it's both, right? We saw during the original notification out to the public that he was looking to join their board, and the stock went through the roof. So that's how much influence he's got. Then he decided he wasn't going to be on the board, and then the stock, nosedived. And then it comes out that he wants to buy the platform. Oh, the stock goes up again. So you've got somebody with that level of influence. What is it? What's the end game? What level of influence does he want to have over the company itself? If it includes how people post, respond, and he wants to control the actual social experience, then I think that could be a problem.
Right, and I've seen a lot of cybersecurity communications on Twitter. I was actually quite surprised when I started using it more and more, um, how much good intel and good information there is on. You can even find good IOCs and hashes and such from it. Do you think that that would be affected at all from this?
I hope not. I think there is back to your point, if you were to look at my feed, my who I follow and who's following me, a lot of them are reverse engineers, open group research scientists that are publicizing the things that they're doing. Some of them are, they're not necessarily bad actors, but they release content or information that many might consider to be a 0 day. There's an argument to be made that, social experiment, if you find a 0 day, contact the organization so they can fix it before it's released. That would be a cyber social responsibility. Not all, reverse engineer scientists, coders believe that, but sharing it with the community, whether it's, an immediate 0 day notification or through a responsible means, there's a lot of content, and there's a lot of good content that can be added to in the open source community, to be able to look at other people's work, collaborate, and then expand on that. I think it's very necessary. Again, the immediacy of the Twitter, your tweets provide immediate access and availability to content. You can say the other social media platforms do that as well. I just don't think that they get the same level of in your face global visibility that Twitter does.
Right. Yeah, I think the more we see this develop out, the more we'll understand where it's going. I wouldn't think that Elon would do too much to actually affect the cybersecurity side of things, but I do think that being able to manipulate that large of a platform is pretty concerning for everybody. Um,
Absolutely.
so with 0 days and vulnerabilities and things, Microsoft just announced their Auto-Patcher. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think it's actually going to be viable for businesses to be able to depend on that?
Well, they're kind of doing it already anyway, right? The Microsoft updates every Tuesday or Thursday, whether you want them or not. You could be in the middle of a meeting, and they're coming. Unless, of course, you've got a controlled environment where you manage your patches through a subscription. Um, you know, Anytime you can automate a process, and we know that 80% of our business processes are using some type of technology. So automation is preferred in most instances. I just want to see what's under the hood. And Microsoft has not always been great about showing us source code and what it's really doing outside of what the intent is. So, and they've gotten a scrutiny over the years for this, but um, I think as long as we understand what the tool is doing, we understand the intent based on what they describe, but what is it really doing? Is it doing anything else? And is it sharing information? We've got different laws across the world that will look at that tool and say, well, you need disclosure, you need consent, you need to provide more visibility and be more open about what your tools do. And they've always had pushback on that. So it'll be interesting to see. But anytime we can automate a process for patching, configuration, that's great. But there should be options for the end user to be able to decide how they're going to implement and use that tool.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I've seen with Microsoft PowerShell, and we've been seeing a lot more attacks that are like living off of the land and everything like that. My real concern would be, do you think that this will actually be another tool that attackers will use to potentially inject malware into systems?
Sure, you know that people are going to play with tools. I do, right? So, hey, here's a new tool. It's from Microsoft. When you consider that most operating systems are a Microsoft-based operating system worldwide, um, it just makes sense to play around with things. I did the same thing with PowerShell. PowerShell is such a powerful tool and utility, and you're going to have reverse engineers, hackers, coders, developers using these tools to outside of what they were intended for. And when you're a developer, such as a software company like Microsoft or Oracle, or name any company, um, you've got to consider while you're building these tools that people are going to use them for other things other than what they were intended for. So this is where the security aspect of it really comes into play.
This was just a natural flow and a natural next step to get additional patching and things. We have seen more and more what we would say is like 0-day vulnerabilities coming out. Do you ever see that slowing down, or is this going to continue to accelerate?
There's a couple of perspectives. We learned a lot from the SolarWinds hack, right? So what we learned there, after we were able to analyze everything and get all of the reports in what happened, right? So we have a alleged Russian state actor gains access to the development environment for SolarWinds. So the development environment for the patches, the updates. In traditionally, when we look at the old SDLC model, we have 4 phases. We develop in a development environment, we test in a separate test environment, and those two environments are not supposed to be connected to the internet. Well, today we do. They're in cloud environments. But the actor is able to get access to SolarWinds environment. They find the dev environment. They look at the signatures that are being, updated. They're being staged, and at that point, they're injecting malware prior to digitally signing the patches, the signatures that are being distributed out to over 300 customers worldwide. So I think the lesson learned for Microsoft here is that if you're going to use a patch engine, the signatures, the patches you developed should be controlled in an environment with, if it's going to be connected to the cloud, which it's probably going to be, right? What's your MFA? What's the level of integrity in developing your patches, the signatures associated with them, and digitally signing that code before it gets distributed out to your customers, your clients. So we learned that from the SolarWinds hack. As far as 0 days go, it's the ability for a software company like Microsoft, or name any of the other big ones, to be able to turn around rapidly and develop a patch, a fix, and distribute it out internationally. Again, they're the number one software company in the world. They have the most operating systems. And Windows XP is still the number one operating system globally. It's not even supported anymore. There's no responsibility for Microsoft to provide patches for that operating system, but any of its live products that are current subscription that haven't been sunsetted, they should be able to rapidly go through the process I described and provide the patches or subscriptions or updates to 0-day threats. But we're not going to stop seeing them.
Recently, we've come across a number of very large 0 days with Spring4Shell and Log4j. Do you think that these larger 0 days are going to continue to come out as well? Or is this just random chance that these two came out relatively close?
No, nothing's random. Think of all of the people. When I get the time, I like to go in the lab and mess around and see how things work, right? I've got probably several different friends that we love to geek out and have these discussions. What is something doing? How is it acting? Can it do this? Well, if I tax the processor, can I achieve this? How are things being filtered? We're always looking under the hood. It's our natural wanting to tear things apart and put it back together, whether it's a puzzle, whether it's an engine under a car, or it's a software application. Unfortunately, we have bad actors, people with malicious intent. Two different opinions there. One is, hey, look what I found. I want everybody to know it was me, and now my reputation goes up. No social responsibility as to what you're doing when you release it. Or you've got the, hey, look what I did. Now, who can I sell it to? Is it bug bounty back to the organization that I exploited? Perhaps they'll pay me. Or is it to an underground hacktivist group or organized crime or a state actor who's going to pay me for my efforts? We're always going to see 0 days. They're going to be bigs. They're going to be small. They're never going to go away. But here's the scary part, and this is the evolution of space. I was recently at the Space Symposium here in Colorado Springs a couple of weeks ago, and I did my own experiment. I walked around to all of the big companies, the Northrop Grummans, the Lockheed Martins, the L3 Harris, the Boeing. And I went up to each one and I said, hey, who can talk to me about how you're instituting a cyber hygiene into your space programs? And almost every single organization looked at me like I had two heads. Well, that person's not here, or I don't even know how to answer that question. And most of the people, in asking a few questions that were there to talk to me were business development people. They weren't scientists. They weren't engineers. They're salespeople, all right? So business development. They spend millions of dollars on these big expo displays, but you talk about 0 days, and you talk about software assurance and cybersecurity in space applications. When we're sending people to outer space, you don't want to be up there when a 0 day hits, by getting a patch update for the air controller system within your space vessel while you're headed to Mars, right? Next thing you know, somebody's hacking into that. We need to have those conversations with the new evolvement of our technology, especially we're going to critical areas like space.
Yeah, exactly. And not just space that we have to worry about, right? Like I'm sure a number of your clients have to deal with this day in and day out. Is how do you just secure a regular network, let alone a
Right.
space shuttle? So we talk about sticking to the basics and things like that. I thought I'd wrap it up with you by just asking. They say stick to the basics. Is there anything that's a little bit more advanced that you kind of recommend to your clients?
It's interesting. We want to connect everything to the internet, and my question to everyone is why? Why do you want to connect everything to the internet, right? So, if I'm a manufacturing company, what's the business case for me to connect my manufacturing environment to the internet? Unless there is a strategic advantage or a logistical advantage, don't do it. In my dissertation for my doctorate, it wasn't really related to cybersecurity, but the title of my dissertation was "Removing the Internet from the Workplace." Now, it wasn't a popular opinion. I published in 2011, and you have to present to your peers and argue against your peers, and people are like, "Oh, I'd never come work for you." I'm like, "Why?" I'm like, there's no justification that every single system within your organization needs to be connected to the internet. And in some instances it doesn't. So now if you've only got an enclave that is critical to your organization, say research and development, and you really are dependent on protecting your intellectual property that's being developed there, maybe I don't want that environment to be connected to the internet. That doesn't mean you can't go to another system and be on the internet. What I'm saying is analyze your business processes, analyze what you're trying to protect. And even within my own organization, I have networks that are not connected to the internet. And that provides me the ability to do things like research and share information. I still do, a cyber hygiene on that environment, but and I still have to have things like acceptable use policy and no USBs and removable media except in a controlled environment. A lot of people would think that's too restrictive, and I'm saying that you have to analyze it, look at it from a risk perspective, because at the end of the day, all business decisions are based on risk, and do what makes sense. Decrease your tactical footprint for the adversary to get access to your environment. Protect the golden goose. You can let some golden eggs get away, but not the goose.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.